Welcome to Calm Down with James Eade. I'm James Eade, and I'm broadcasting out of Edge Studio in San Francisco. Now, the reports of San Francisco's demise have been greatly exaggerated. As a matter of fact, it kind of gets me upset when I think about how people are talking about how the city's doing so poorly when most of the neighborhoods are just like they were. Of course, the COVID pandemic hit a lot of cities and hit a lot of companies, and companies moved from the inner cities. All of this is true. But if you come visit San Francisco, I think you'd be pleasantly surprised. There's so much wonderful things to do and so many wonderful things to see. So I'm going to get over my agitation that people are talking bad about San Francisco. Of course, it's one of my favorite cities, and I have enjoyed living here, living around here, and going to many events in San Francisco. So how do I calm down when I get agitated, when someone says something bad about the city that I love? Well, for me, I practice deep breathing. I take a deep breath in and out. And to my surprise, the mind can calm the body and the body can calm the mind. I didn't find this out on my own. I was told to try this. And when I tried it, it worked. It works for me. It may not work for you. Your job is to find what works for you. It may be something that other people don't do. And it's maybe something that other people think is ridiculous. But if it works for you, do it. Have confidence in yourself. Because the main thing is to remain calm. I never made a good decision when I was agitated or anxious. And I spent a lot of time agitated or anxious. And you might as well throw in the third A word, angry. We're doing too much of anger in this society. We're doing too much of being uptight. What are we going to do to calm down? Well, we have to encourage each other to try to remain calm, but we don't want to worry about other people so much as ourselves. This has been my experience, and my strength has been derived from worrying about myself and worrying about my side of the street rather than trying to change other people's behavior, because there's no change without change within. And it's inside yourself where you begin. It's not your brain, it's not your heart. It's deep inside where it starts. And yes, I'm talking about a spiritual change. That was true for me. And if you had told me that it would be a spiritual change that got me off of my bad habits and my anger and anxiety and addiction, could I even say that? Yes, even addiction. Because although the calm down is for everybody, it's also for people that are suffering from addiction or trying to recover from addiction, which, my ulterior motive was to get you to buy this book, Freedom. Freedom by James Eade. It's a book I wrote about my descent into addiction and my recovery from it. And it's a story for me, but it has so many commonalities for so many people. I get told that all the time, and it's been my experience. When we share stories, and it really doesn't matter what your addiction is. Addiction is addiction, and recovery is recovery. And recovery, one of the keys to it is to have a community. Don't try to do it alone. Find someone else, a commonality that you have with someone else. And there are many programs to choose from where you might find people dealing with some of the similar things that you're dealing with. And you find out that you're not alone. And the feelings that you have are not yours and yours alone. They're shared by many. This country is suffering from a problem of loneliness. And one of the ways to fix it is to get together, to join a community, to be part of a community. I used to live by an old Groucho Marx joke. I would never join a community that would have me for a member, or he said a club. But that's no longer true. And you find a community where you fit in. And even though you've never fit in anywhere before, you might fit in with these people that are doing the same things you're doing, trying to find a spiritual answer to the problems of the material world. Because so far in our material world, we're always stepping on someone's neck to get ahead, to get ourselves up and over whatever hurdle it is. We don't care who we hurt in our process, and that's what people have taught us from when we were very young. It's a capitalistic way of thinking, survival of the fittest, that sort of thing. Well, Darwin would tell us it's the survival of the most fit, those who fit best, not the most fit. those who fit best will survive. And fitting in with your environment, fitting in with your community is one of the things that you can give to yourself. So we're going to go into more ways that you can calm yourself down. There are many ways. For me, deep breathing, yoga. And if you told me that I would be doing yoga 10 years ago, I would have laughed at you. But yes, I do yoga now. And so it's one of the ways that you can find things. Just be willing to try. So what's the harm? You can try something and say, I don't like it. It's not good for me. But what if you try something and you do like it and it is good for you? Then you keep it. So this is Calm Down with James Eade, and our next segment is going to involve our senior correspondent from Los Angeles, Rick Rosner. And Rick Rosner is going to tell us what's got him uptight today. Thank you for joining.
Welcome to Calm Down with James Eade's segment with our senior correspondents from LA. And that's Rick Rosner. Rick, hi.
Hey.
Thanks for joining us again. And I was wondering if there's anything that's bugging you today. If you wanted to talk.
I may have done this topic before, but I don't know because I'm getting older and my memory's not as good as it was. And that is freaking getting older. Specifically, missing the being too old for the longevity revolution. There's a longevity researcher, David Sinclair, who says the first person to live to 150 has probably already been born over the next, but it's not going to be guys our age, most likely, but over the next 50 years, people are going to get, especially like rich tech bros, are going to get all these extra decades of life if they're not killed by the poors, if poor people don't
revolt.
Yeah.
As they have in the past historically.
I'm always reminded of my aging and mortality. These are all hair transplants. This is hair from the back of my head, sliced out, planted in the front of my head. So I've been able to keep up with that somewhat. It actually looks better as I've gotten grayer because black plugs, hair plugs, show up worse than when your hair matches your scalp. But still don't like it. There were for a few months, decades ago, I was able to bench with terrible form, 300 pounds. And now I can barely push up 165 on a machine, not even with free weights.
Right.
I've had some benefits of amazing new medicine. They found a little teeny tumor in my kidney, 1 centimeter, that's a benefit of technology. It used to be, they only found stuff like that when it was big enough to cause symptoms, make you piss blood or something.
Right.
No, they find these things incidentally before they're dangerous. And they didn't even need to operate. All they needed to do was they stuck a long needle in me, flooded the needle with liquid nitrogen at minus 185, and killed the tumor by turning it into a ball of ice.
Right.
But they also killed one of my abs. So I don't know. Can you see this? Like,
oh yeah,
this thing right here is they accidentally froze the nerve that runs. You have 2 layers of abs. You got the abs that run this way that give you a 6-pack if you have a 6-pack. Underneath you have like a bunch of belts for extra support. They killed one of the belts, and maybe I'll get it back. Maybe the nerve will come back. Maybe it won't. But it's just one more reminder that the clock is ticking, and I don't like it.
Right. I was just speaking with a woman I know from back east who, we were talking about, and it just came up because both of our mothers are in their 90s, and my mother is still in remarkable health, but she's wondering why she's still around. And I told her that I didn't have a large circle of good friends, but I had deep friendships, and of the 4 that would just drop over the house periodically. Two moved away, and two had they were so selfish that they died on me. That was so inconsiderate.
The frickin' pricks.
And so now I'm like, at my age, how am I going to make good friends like that again? Probably not.
You're not. Plus, everybody's an a-hole now. So like, it's everybody's got a social media crust of awfulness. It's why people don't hook up any. It's one of the reasons. Like, social media raises everybody's expectations. 100 years ago, they've done studies. You married somebody who lived 4 blocks away from you.
Mm-hmm.
That was like the average distance.
Wow.
Now you've got access to the world, so now everybody thinks they're freaking special, and it makes everybody kind of an a-hole.
But young people aren't having children, and they're not settling in.
Because they're all a-holes because it's not their fault. It's because social media has taught them that they're super valuable social media presences. Plus they're watching, 800 channels of entertainment. Plus there's a cornucopia. We grew up in a porn desert. Adam Carolla has a joke that his grandpa, the only way he could masturbate was to lie looking up at the sky and wait for a sexy shaped cloud to drift by.
Oh, that
now
sounds so sad.
There are a billion images, so you know what you had to do to meet your spouse, right? And it was a lot of work and a lot of like braving rejection, and I lifted a ton of weights and I worked in bars to meet people, and it's work. But if you're a modern incel, like a guy who's just like, can't be bothered, he's got so much porn to jack off to, he can console him. That's another thing of aging. I used to always be able to, if I felt bad about stuff, I could just jerk off, fall asleep, and be unconscious instead of being sad. Now the aging, has the limit. I only get like 4 jerk offs a week. My body's, it's like, which would be great for some people, but it's not my previous, level.
Right.
And it's a lot of work, and it's noodly. It's like, come in and
Well, you have to, work up to it, like small talk, and what do they call it? You can't just jump right into it anymore.
Foreplay. I shouldn't have to foreplay myself.
Do you take yourself out to dinner once in a while?
No,
send yourself flowers. But the idea of getting older, we used to say, with age comes wisdom, but that doesn't seem, from what I'm hearing, like that's a offset that suffices.
Well, look at our peers. That's MAGA is like mostly our demographic.
Ouch, that hurts.
And that the MAGA is not wisdom. Like MAGA, like Fox News is set. I believe that there are whole multi-billion-dollar industries that are designed to target people our age and older who still have agency, who are still in charge of their affairs, but whose brains aren't as sharp as they were. My mother-in-law, she's gone now, but before she was, somebody sold her $30,000 worth of windows. They made a call and said, oh, well, your house needs new windows. And she goes, okay, my house needs new windows. And my wife, there's nothing wrong with her, put a stop to it before it went through. But, Fox News is designed to target those same people. Simple messaging, bright colors, pretty ladies in tight dresses, guys with big square heads and big necks. That's another thing. My neck used to be as wide. It used to start here and come out. It used to be as wide as my head. A lovely, big, beefy neck. Now, it's okay, but it's not the man neck that I.
Yeah, you look like a walking headbutt ready to happen. right?
Yeah, it was nice.
Intimidating.
Yeah, people would look at me with my giant neck and immediately think that is an idiot. That's a big dumb idiot. And I loved it. It was
Underestimate me all you want. It's good. But the aging thing again, we used to talk about age with wisdom, but what we're seeing, as you're pointing out, is a demographic. I mean, even in the Chess Federation, the governance of chess, which is a very strange thing to bring up, except that I used to do it for 30 years, and it was all aging white males. That's starting to change, but
so in the field of IQ, there's fluid intelligence and there's crystallized intelligence.
Yes.
And fluid intelligence is the ability to think fast and solve new problems, which young people have. But the trade is the older you get, you maybe lose the fluid, but the crystallized is accumulated knowledge. So you can be an old chess player based on everything you've learned. You may not be able to think as fast or as creatively, but you've got this incredible library of moves in your brain.
Yeah. You know what's evening that out? Because experience used to be a big thing for older chess players, is that computers have changed everything now.
Because and we don't even know what the computers are up to. Like with the game of Go, the self-training AIs, and in chess, they'll make crazy moves. They're like, what the hell is that? People can't understand what they're doing, but they win off of these nutty moves.
Yes, absolutely. You're absolutely right. And commentators in live events would say something like, that's a computer move. Like a human would never think of that. And it's counterintuitive or whatever it is, but the computers don't care about any of that. It's just number crunching.
Well, the computers aren't even thinking. They're just like weighing probabilities.
Right.
And but like, so in the olden days, in the 1300s, you're a shoemaker, your dad was, your kid's gonna be.
Right.
There's a cathedral that's down the street that's being built. It's been under construction for 200 years. It won't be done for another 200 years. Things didn't change fast.
That's correct.
In that world, age, and age, you're old at 40 back then. You're
right.
But age equals wisdom because the landscape isn't changing.
Very
now
good.
We double the amount of medical information every 73 days. There's 32 times as much information about medicine at the end of a year from now as there was at the beginning of the year. It's just
absolutely right. The rate of change is not just going up, it's accelerating. And
so it's the grandma with the remote control problem. We're all the freaking grandma.
Right. I used to have my niece help me with my iPhone. I used to be a systems programmer, but some of these apps were just confounding to me.
Yeah, I feel bad that I don't play video. The last video game that I was pretty good at was freaking Tetris.
Oh, yeah.
Tetris I'm 30, 40 years behind in video skills.
Well, what I could do is like move based. Like a game like Civilization, for example, was, the computer wasn't moving while I was thinking. It had to wait until I moved and then it moved. And then, that kind of thing.
Okay.
So that's the kind of game that I could probably still play. But the games where you have to actually use your thumbs and move and things like that, it's well beyond my ability to play anything like that, even mediocrely.
Yeah, which is another part of aging, where I remember I had one grandpa who made it to 96 and a half. And then his dentures broke. And the replacement dentures didn't fit as well. So he lost the enjoyment of eating.
Right.
And
what's left?
His eyesight, we've got an old dog here who's got cataracts, and fortunately dogs get a lot of information from other than their eyes. So I don't think she's too bummed out. I'm bummed out on her behalf.
Sure.
These freaking dogs. All right. I could do a whole, calm down segment about how it's bullshit that pets only live to 15 if you're lucky.
I know.
Like we've bred for everything but longevity, and that's a little tougher to breed for, but it's doable.
So do you think you could be frozen, and then when this is optimized, then unfrozen?
That's the best bad bet there is right now. If I had to do something in the next 2 months, that would be the only thing available, and it's crappy. I mean, it's better than it was. There's a company called 21st Century Medicine that has frozen a rabbit kidney, which is, I don't know, maybe this big, I don't know, and revived it. And they don't freeze it, they vitrify it, which is making it cold so fast that water crystals can't form, because water crystals are like knives. So if you freeze something slowly, all these knives form and they slice your cells to heck.
Right.
But the whole vitrification process is they take out the water before that can mess you up. They replace it with glycerin and then maybe some other stuff. It's a many-step process.
But they can figure that out.
But it's right now it's goofy science. I mean, it's science, but you're taking a massive leap of faith. As far as I know, the only celebrity who says he's going to have that done is Simon Cowell.
Oh.
And Simon Cowell isn't afraid. His reputation, he's a jerk. His whole deal is, I'm going to be an asshole.
Only the jerks will come back.
But he's the only one who's a big enough asshole to admit that he will get put in a cryo tank when he's gone.
Right, stasis. Well, and what about living to 150? Will you enjoy your last 50 years, do you think?
So, as I brought up earlier, my panacea is jerking off. If I can get to 135 and I'm still able to do that, say 2.5 times a week, that might be enough.
Okay.
But yeah, you don't want to.
Everyone has their own tools and techniques, by the way. So
yeah.
But
yeah, I mean, if you're 135 and you're bedridden, or I've read science fiction where people that old have to be in space so they can be weightless because the touch of anything would just break them. I mean, that's no good.
No.
Except, I don't know, even if you're totally breakable, you can still have the VR goggles and picture yourself as a younger person. But yeah, but the part of the deal of living to 150 is your health they call it falling off the table. I think we've talked about where you're healthy, dead. Instead of healthy.
You don't dwindle.
Yeah, you want to fall off. You want to, it's health span as much as lifespan. But of course, like the medicine that lets us live to 150, that we might be able to get in 2040, 2050, should also let us, be healthier. Let us look, if you're 128, maybe you can look like you're 78, but weird.
I'm thinking like replaceable parts, like machine. You're mostly machine rather than human.
That would be great. And that if you can do that, if you can have your brain scanned and just download it into virtual space, then you don't need to worry about having a physical body. Though that would get old, because if you've been in the metaverse, it's crappy now.
Yeah.
And all the technology, that's another topic for bitching about that.
Right.
We never get wonderful technology. By the time we get it, it's always a little crapped up. Like we loved our iPhones for how long? A year? And then it's like, yeah, it's a swamp of
they were the greatest thing since sliced bread.
Right, but everything kind of gets Blade Runner. Blade Runner is the dirty future where the capitalism kind of pisses all over everything and makes it grimy. So I forget I lost our chain of discourse here.
Well, what we're talking about is the effects of aging, and my losing friends. Your your neck is no longer what it was, not so impressive. And these things seem to me right now to be inevitable. However, we're talking about a not too distant future where it isn't necessarily inevitable. And we're a little bit jealous that we're too old.
Yeah.
Is that a recap?
Yeah, I mean, we've benefited. I've benefited from modern technology.
You certainly have to.
Hair transplants, getting a tumor like frozen instead of getting cut open, having it detected before it was dangerous.
Right.
But there's all this amazing stuff in the future.
Yeah.
Like that you, for 50 grand or 75 grand, you have a pig and it's genetically twinned to you, and they grow you a new kidney or a new liver or a new heart, or I don't know, maybe a new frontal lobe.
Well, scrolling across the bottom of the screen is a way to contact us, info@airu.tv. And if you, I'm saying this right now because I don't want the PETA people to use that to contact me. Because we're not going to grow.
So, I would feel bad for the pig, but like,
Yeah,
maybe the way, well, like they've been able to grow an ear on the back of a mouse. Like they've grafted cartilage. So like maybe when the pig grows a kidney for you, that can be your personal pig, and they just use it for whatever, and it gets to live a mostly happy life. And occasionally they stick some genes in it, and it grows an extra organ for you. But meantime, it's enjoying a very happy pig life.
yeah, okay. Then I can get behind
But
that.
that's not going to be the way it is. I mean, obviously they're going to freaking kill the pig.
Well, and they're going to do it so that it's cost effective, and so the
Right,
pig,
right.
Yeah, the pig's happiness is not going to be a corporation's concern.
No.
All right, Rick. Well, thank you so much for telling us a little bit about your agitation, and we know what you do to calm down.
I also go to the gym a ton.
Yes, you told us.
And I don't do the other thing at the gym, which would get me arrested.
That's okay. See, with age comes wisdom. All right. Thanks again. I'm going to take you off the air and stick around for a minute, and I'll talk to you after the show.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
That was Rick Rosner, senior correspondent from Los Angeles. And this has been the segment where we talk about our gripes and how we can calm down from them. And everybody has their own ways. Rick has his. I have mine. Mine is a deep breath. So thank Hi, welcome to this segment of Calm Down with James Eade. I'm James Eade, and we're working today on the niyamas. In this segment, we're going to talk about tapasya. And I can't tell you too much about it. I know a little bit about it, but I'm going to bring in our specialist, the yoga teacher and yoga therapist, Yudhishthira. Thank you for joining us again.
Good morning, Jim.
Thank you. Yeah, it's great to see you. What I know about tapasya is the English translation. I got a cheat sheet here that says austerity. How does that sound?
Well, that's a great place to begin
Okay.
about what tapasya is and isn't.
All right, so I'll let you go. You
Sure.
tell us what it is. And if you want to tell us what it isn't, that would be a longer. Well, we might not have time for that.
Well, hello, everyone. I want to sort of, piggyback on what Jim sort of added as the introduction, and to say that the practice of tapasya and that English word austerity, unlike last week's niyama of santosha, santosha lines up usually with contentment, and that's not far off. But with tapasya, austerity it absolutely does not work for most Westerners. I just honestly think they could have done better, whoever they are. So let me sort of begin with that and say that the practice of tapasya, the word tapas is actually the word that refers to friction or heat. And so it is that the practice of tapasya is a practice of taking friction or resistance and turning it into positive energy, turning it something that's to our benefit. And, the word austerity, it just doesn't ring, it doesn't sound comfortable. Like if I say to you that my life is very austere, that doesn't make you sound like I'm very happy. It makes it sound like I'm suffering. And tapasya is not about suffering. And so we'll sort of explore it from that point. Austerity tends to make it feel as if my life is difficult or challenging or uncomfortable. And tapasya is none of those things. However, each of those, difficult, challenging, uncomfortable, could be a starting off point. Perhaps many of us watched the Olympics, and the diving competition is always fascinating because it combines certain skills. But there is the way in which they come out to the end of the board, and they use that board as a way of providing energy that will, first of all, there's a downward pull of gravity, but then there's the upward push of the board. And the board and the way that the divers use it is very much like tapasya. And I need to give you a disclaimer and say that tapasya over the years has been my most favorite of the yamas and niyamas. I don't know if that even makes any sense, because they're all simply guidelines, either things that you don't want to do, the yamas, or guidelines of things that you do want to do in order to find true lasting happiness. True lasting happiness is never going to be contained within one lifetime. There are a lot of the teachings of yoga that don't necessarily fit in directly to what I'm sharing with you in these conversations about the yamas and niyamas, but they're more of the backdrop, sort of the big underpinnings of all of yoga. And I'm referring in particular now to the practice of karma and reincarnation. Karma and reincarnation is it requires that you look beyond the single incarnation for what's going on. Why is it happening? Why do these certain events keep recurring in my life? I had a friend recently who's a yoga teacher and does personal counseling, very much like I do. And she wrote to me and said, I can't talk right now. We were going to talk. I can't talk right now because I need to talk to a friend who's so enthusiastic about a relationship that he's about ready to get into. And he feels like this is finally the one, even though that my friend could see clearly and objectively that this relationship that this other person was going to enter into was pretty much the exact same situation that he had just gotten out of, which led to great suffering. So you might notice that there are things in your life, perhaps it's relationships, perhaps it's events. For example, a tendency to be involved in automobile accidents, something like that. Or a recurring situation where at a job, you keep running into the same problem over and over and over again. So these situations that are challenging, that cause friction, are not meant to cause a suffering. They're simply an opportunity for us to convert that suffering, that discomfort, the friction, into something positive. I drive an all-electric car. It's a little car. It's a Chevrolet Bolt. It's not a very fancy car, but it has a setting on it, which is really, really cool. And that setting is called resistance. And that's what Tapasya really is about using resistance in your life as a way of creating energy that you can then use to expand your sense of who you are, expand your sense of dominion, expand your sense of what you are able to accept and then be at peace with. Now, I don't know if you watched last week's um, talk that I gave on the topic of Santosha, but so I just sort of brought these two things together, and it's a good practice. Santosha, acceptance, and then contentment is necessary before tapasya can actually take place. Tapasya means that we were able to convert that which is challenging into a blessing, into a positive reality for us. When I'm not teaching yoga or practicing yoga therapy, I'm also a science teacher. I teach to kids who are second grade all the way up through 8th grade. And I love teaching science, and it's fun. The original chemists were called alchemists. And we've all seen pictures of, they tend to be in sepia tones of these people in strange hats and strange robes and strange vessels and things being heated and poured. And the alchemists had a single goal back around the 12th or 13th century. They began to have this idea, because gold was very valuable, still is. And the idea that you could take a base metal, something that was easily gotten. In that case, it was lead. Lead was an easy ore to refine and to purify, and then you could use lead. So lead was plentiful. And could you turn lead into gold? And that was the quest of the alchemists for centuries, quite literally, to turn lead into gold. And while, of course, that was a foolish quest, from our standpoint, at the time, it looked very reasonable. Now, for us, I'm trying to steer myself away from where I was about ready to go, which was that the alchemists found a way through all their missteps. They found a way to actually coat base metal with other metals that looked like gold. It wasn't truly gold, but it was, in fact, something that could look like gold. So you might have lead in the middle, but on the outside you would have brass or copper, something that was shiny and pretty. But if you cut into it and if you scratched at it, you'd see it wasn't really what it was presented to be as being. So tapasya is essentially the way in which we in our daily lives can take something that is given to us and turn it into something that is of great value, even though at first it appears to be something that we didn't want, something that was difficult. I mentioned that tapasya is my favorite niyama, and it's true. And it's very much like this. If you are able to step back and you view, for me, I can have many different ways of saying God. I can say Heavenly Father, or I can say Divine Mother, or I can say my beloved friend with a capital B and a capital F to really make it distinct. But tapasya is very much like this, is that, if you think about when you were growing up, your mom or your dad cooked a favorite dish and you always looked forward to it, and, I look at tapasya as being one of these gifts that Divine Mother has given me, and I get to enjoy it. I get to enjoy it, not because it is necessarily the easiest thing to chew or has the best flavor, but it leaves me feeling afterwards light. I don't feel heavy. I feel expansive. I still feel like I am positive. I don't want to go take a nap. And so Tapasya is very much like that. I'm looking at my notes over here. So Tapasya is grounding. I mentioned the word friction. When you're on a yoga mat, this goes back to last week's talk as well, that when you're on a yoga mat, you have a control over this little bit of real estate. The value of a mat underneath you, and by the way, there's a whole line of yoga mats that are called tapas mats. I think it's a brand name, but it's a good name. And it refers to using friction, that is the resistance of the mat, that allows you to be stable and steady, to expand yourself into a warrior pose where you're really manifesting the power of the divine that flows through you, or where you're coming into a standing backward bend and where your heart's wide open and you do it with confidence and faith. And so the mat gives you the stability, the resistance to make that sort of thing happen. In daily life, in science, in physics, resistance is used all the time to generate power. Think of a hydroelectric dam turning the blades of a turbine to generate electricity, or wind turbines, the propeller capturing the force of the wind and the resistance of the propeller turns the turbine and generates the electricity. So it's a sort of a universal principle. For us, the practice of Tapasya requires, again, that you begin in simple ways that you can control. This is why I oftentimes go back to what happens in a hatha yoga practice, an asana practice, yoga postures. What happens there is very much under your control. So in a yoga posture, the way we practice Tapasya is perhaps to hold a posture for 3, maybe 5, maybe 7 breaths longer. Think about being in a kneeling lunge, like a warrior 2 pose. Your arms are extended, your legs are supporting you. And after a certain time, your legs begin to get tighter and tighter because you have begun to reach the limit of your ability to provide energy from the muscles themselves. So the practice of Tapasya is to say, well, I'm going to hold this 3 breaths longer. So your first inclination is to come out of the pose, and instead you say, let me breathe into the pose. Let me hold the pose a little bit longer, because I know that there will be a benefit from doing that. And oftentimes what happens when we do that, if we're bringing the energy from our legs into our heart, we begin to feel an increased flow of energy through our willingness to take the resistance and the challenge of holding the pose longer. So just translate that into daily life. What if I'm in a situation where someone has confronted me wrongly about something I did or said or wrote? And my tendency is to scream at them, I didn't do it, and walk away. What if instead you were to stay, practice acceptance, be contented with this? You may not change this person's mind. But then, instead of walking away, saying to that person, this might be true. Maybe what you're saying is accurate. And at that point, you begin to transmute, to change this negative circumstance into a positive. And you've done it not by resisting, but by using the resistance to fuel what happens next. And the end result ends up being just magnificent. And it all ties into this simple ability to control our reactions and what happens next. One of Yogananda's foremost disciples, a woman named Gyanamata, means mother of wisdom. She had a wonderfully wise teaching about this matter of reaction. She said, your first reaction, your first thought, your first reactive thought is free. It's a get out of jail free card. It's a joker. It doesn't have any particular value, but every thought that comes after that first one, that is up to you. So the practice of tapasya is about acknowledging that, yes, I may have this first reaction, but then I'm going to take that resistance. I'm going to transmute it. I'm going to find a way to use that energy, that resistance, and become bigger, to grow, to become more open, more receptive, and in many ways, honestly, more powerful. It's how I get to turn the lead of reactivity into the gold of self-realization, the goal of yoga. So that's tapasya, and santosh or santosha and tapas or tapasya, they very much fit together. They're a pair. They work in tandem. And so you might consider working with the two of them side by side. So blessings and namaste.
Yudhishthira, thank you. That was fascinating to me. I have a first kind of trivial question, and then
Sure.
I have something that is more more serious to me. But the first one is I used to practice and still do sometimes isometrics, and is that an example of using resistance to increase energy?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Given using yoga postures as another example.
Mm-hmm.
If you're in plank pose,
Mm-hmm.
it's an isometric pose. You are not moving, but there is resistance present.
Right.
It's interesting in that pose in particular, and this really goes to the heart of tapasya, is that at first it feels as if the resistance is in your upper body, your arms, shoulders,
Right.
and chest. If you hold the pose any longer, you'll begin to realize that it's the navel center, the core,
Yeah.
that is really being exercised.
Right.
And if one puts his attention in that spot and maybe squeezes there a little bit, the upper body can relax.
I'm glad you mentioned that. I will try that because that's a tough one for me. The other thing that I really wanted to talk about a little bit is when I first started meditation, I had a trouble with it not being able to close my mind to the outside world and being distracted by thoughts that weren't helpful and were interfering with my ability to meditate. And I thought of it as austerity at tapasya, that when I could focus my mind and just relieve it of all thought of outside activities. And is that also a good use of the word?
You've made me realize that in speaking about tapasya and santosha both, and in fact all the yamas and niyamas, I tend to take them into the outside world. I tend to take them into like physical reality.
Sure.
And there's nothing wrong with that because that's where we
Right.
tend to live most of our lives.
Right.
But every one of these yamas and niyamas actually has a higher practice. I say higher because it becomes less material, less physical. And you just gave a beautiful example of the fact. And so let me sort of expand a little bit upon that, because the way in which santosha and tapasya fit together with what you were just describing is this. You close your eyes, you know your goal is to have the mind be still and your heart to be open. And that you may even have meditation techniques that you use
Right.
to help achieve that. And the techniques are wonderful, but the technique is not the meditation.
Right.
The technique is a bridge, a path that leads you to that. And so what often happens when we sit to meditate is that as if we have no control at all, a stream of thoughts begin to go through our mind. Practice of santosha is oftentimes simply allowing those thoughts to occur. And to then begin to slow them down until you begin to notice that there is, between one thought and the next, a little bit of space,
Mm-hmm.
to then begin to focus on the space rather than the thought.
Right.
And what naturally happens then is that there is the more space in thought. And so that goes from the place of acceptance to more a place of contentment, because naturally you begin to get closer to your goal of stillness and a
Right.
stillness of mind, open heart. And then Tapasya describes that practice
Right.
of allowing it to
Right.
happen, using it to your benefit, and knowing that the result. And by the way, you can also do it the other way. Some people do it. Like, I am not going to allow a single thought in my head
Mm-hmm.
isn't the one I want to be there. I'm going to completely devoid or remove all thoughts. I can do that for about this long,
Uh-huh.
And I can't do it for much longer. It's much, much more productive for me to go through the process I just described,
Right.
because my mind, this is one other thing about meditation, our minds are built to meditate. We are made to meditate. I was watching
I'm going to write that down.
I was watching a teaching video by a friend named Dr. Peter Van Houten. He's a medical physician. He's also a yogi, and he has this wonderful video. In fact, I'll send you a link to it. It's about being calm and how to use the techniques that I've been sharing to remain calm. And because he's a MD, he has this model of a head and brain, and you can pull the brain out of the head. You take the different parts of the brain apart, and so what you find is that you pulled apart the amygdala, and it looks like a baby brain.
Uh-huh.
It looks it's got two parts, but it is not capable of anything that's conscious. It reacts.
Yes.
Reacts.
Right.
It saves you. You survive because of it, and it's a good thing.
Yes.
But up on top of that is all this big part of our brain, which is where the conscious part of our life goes on. We process what's going on around us. But in meditation, we bring our attention to the point between the eyebrows. And we are naturally built to move energy from the medulla, at the base of the brain, through the conscious part of our brain and forward.
Right.
And when we get good at it, it happens more naturally through practice.
Absolutely. No, I can, from personal experience, just testify to that. And the other thing that I always had an issue with contempt prior to investigation, and it was true for yoga. When I thought about all these poses that just help my flexibility. But one of the things, and I think this is about Tapasya, so I'm going to ask you if I'm accurate about saying that. I learned that I could channel the energy in my body through yoga poses, and I could make the energy could be inward and upward directed. And this ability to be able to channel or focus the energy to move it within my own body was a remarkable insight for me. And
your observation is obviously one that you've experienced yourself,
mm-hmm.
which is the way that all of yoga works. Yoga is there, I will, within my fellow teachers here at Ananda, I will sometimes, we will oftentimes have social events. And so I went to such an event this weekend, and there was a lot of people who were there. Over half of them had nothing to do with Ananda. We just all happened to be together at a dinner at a farm in Half Moon Bay. And so we were sitting with people that we didn't know at all. And so I was sitting there, and people were asking about Ananda and about yoga, and I was just sharing with them in a way that I thought they would be receptive to. But afterwards, in talking with some of my friends, they said, "What were you talking about?" I said I was proselytizing, and was only funny because of the fact something we never do.
Right.
We never proselytize because yoga has to be experienced, and people have to be ready for that experience.
Yes, I agree.
So the thing about a yoga posture is that it's very much, because my mind works in science and sort of this esoteric way at the same time, that I think of a yoga posture as simply being almost magical, the way in which if you put your body in a pose, hold it, relax into it, that a particular signature of energy will begin to flow through you. And that flow is unique, but it needs to be experienced. And then, and this is the nature of Ananda Yoga, when we come back to our center, we pause. That energy comes back to your center as well. And it will naturally, if your attention is put here, come up here.
Right.
So the energy naturally comes inward and upward.
Yes.
And the very front part of the brain, and you can measure it on equipment.
I bet.
Electrodes up there.
Yeah.
The blood flow, the energy begins to become increased to the prefrontal lobes of the brain. And that's where we begin to stop thinking of ourselves as individual, where we stop thinking about ourselves as needing to react or respond, where we are simply wide open. And so what you're describing is in my experience, very true and very accurate. And it's also, and this is important, it's intentional.
Yes.
Yeah. It doesn't, it can happen spontaneously.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. But
I think a lot of people have had an experience of being in a particular setting in nature, often at the ocean,
right,
where you just get the sense of sudden, like the sense of you being separate drops away.
Connectedness. Yes.
Yeah. And the sense of being part of everything.
Right.
Automatically arises.
Right.
Well, why does that not happen all the time?
Yeah. Because once connected, we're always connected, but I spend most of my time feeling disconnected.
Exactly. And there you go.
And so, but these practices have been making me feel connected more than I ever have. And also, if I feel connected first thing in the morning, when I do the things that I need to do to make me feel that connection, then whatever time during the rest of the day, if I'm anxious, agitated, whatever, I know I've done it once already. I can get connected again. And that is confidence. And I have this ability now to restore myself to that same feeling. And that feeling makes all the big stuff look like little stuff.
Well, this is actually a great sort of stepping off point into our next and final niyama, which is that of self-study, is the way it's usually put in English.
Oh, I looked at my cheat sheet. Okay. I can't pronounce it, so.
It's Swadhyaya.
Oh, there you go, Swadhyaya. Of course. So I will see you back then.
All right, and I'll look forward to it.
All right. Thanks again. I will just remove you and say goodbye for now.
All right.
Bye-bye. Well, that was Eade teaching me about the niyamas, and I hope that some of the viewers also learned a thing or two, because as far as I'm concerned, the things not to do are important, but the things that you should focus on and try to do, well, to me, that makes a lot more interesting life. Thanks. Thanks. Welcome to the final segment of Calm Down. And I want to introduce to you, my loyal listeners and viewers, Divya Lovewise, that wise yogi. And I would like you, at the end of every show, I'm a little bit agitated and worked up and all that kind of stuff. And I was wondering if there's something that you could do to calm me down. could you just say goodbye to us in any way that you see fit?
Sure, I would
Oh.
love to.
I will take off and let you do that. Thanks again.
Okay. Well, bring yourself into a comfortable seated position, feeling your feet on the floor and letting your hands rest in your lap. Palms up or palms down is a great way to start bringing yourself back into center and focus with your own divine energy and letting go of anything that might have wanted to stick to us throughout the day that may be energy we don't want to carry throughout the day. So having this basic position, feeling grounded, even closing your eyes and taking a deep breath in through the nose and out through the mouth. And one of the ways we can bring ourselves back to center is observing with our senses what we can feel, the temperature of the air in the room, observing any sounds that you hear. Noticing any smells in the air. And then bring your awareness to your breath. As though you're watching it from the inside out. Watching the inhale wash into the body. And watching the exhale wash out of the body. Just like the waves of the ocean as they wash onto the shore. And if you find your mind still wandering, you can even place one hand on your lower belly and one hand on your heart so that you can feel with your hands this breath washing in and washing out. And with your mind's eye, visualize this inhalation and exhalation as an internal shower, clearing away your energy so that it's refreshed, it's rejuvenated, and it's restored. Releasing your hands into your lap, just give yourself a few seconds of pause in this return to peace, enjoying it. When you are ready, you can open your eyes, wiggling your fingers and your toes, feeling grounded in your body, grounded in the best part of yourself. And you can go out into the world and carry that best part in the forefront of your mind and your heart.